So I'm going to go ahead because this is a little bit, this is digging for the truth, so I got to bring a little bit of Hebrew up. So the word origination of Nephilim, I'm just going to tell you, is actually the Hebrew is called Nephal, okay, or Nephil. So Nephal is just to fall. The Nephil or the feller or bully or giant, and then we look at the Greek, and that's where we get the Nephalim or the Nephilim, and those are the fallen ones. That's just all it means. These are the fallen ones. So we go back to the Genesis 6:4 account, and we know that these are the fallen angels. Mm-hmm. Okay. So where did it go from there? Because the wheels start coming off real fast, and we don't have to stick with any. I put, just so y'all know how I do this, man. I got notes, but I want to just see where his head goes next in regards to giants, because we start with the Genesis 6:4 account,
right?
Okay, but tell me in your mind, where does the giant account go after Genesis 6:4?
Well, I think the common assessment is, there were crazy things that were going on. And we have skeleton bones and all sorts of stuff that we have to look at and somehow make sense of. But then there was this flood, and everything started over. And so, Noah, Shem, Ham, Japheth, their wives, they repopulate the whole earth. So whatever happened back then, we don't really have to deal with. Let's just decide to set that off to the side. And how he got all those animals on one ark, I don't really want to figure that out either.
Well, I should do a whole nother podcast on that. I can tell you exactly, because it wasn't only animals, only the kinds. That's the difference. Right. They talk about species, but it don't have to be the kinds.
So I think you go all the way up until, David and Goliath, and then you're now confronted with another 10-foot tall, giant at that time, which would be a small one based on what we're studying here.
So, okay. So let's do this. I want to go ahead and have this conversation. We're going to talk about some stuff that gets a little bit out in the weeds, okay? And I think it's important because, first of all, I want to go, it says that there were giants before the flood and there's giants after the flood. I'm going to tell you my opinion, and then you can give me your opinion, okay? So there's two, in my opinion, really strong scenarios. The first one is that if we back up just a little bit, there's the abyss and the pit. So we know that the fallen angels that, created the Nephilim with man, okay, if you go to Revelations 9, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but those were cast down to the pit, the abyss. In fact, the Bible in Revelation 9 talks that that's Abaddon or Apollyon in Greek. Okay, so these guys are gone, but there's a whole bunch of other fallen angels. So after the flood, they could have done it again. Okay, Satan says, "Hey, all right, let's do this again," and instruct some of the other angels, fallen angels. All right, let's do this again. The other theory is that because we didn't really talk about this, but if you actually look in I think it's in Genesis 6, beginning in verse 7, I think. And let me go back here. Actually, did I not put that in here? There we go. Yeah, Genesis 6, 7 through 9. All right. And so it says, so the Lord said, I will destroy man, whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, creeping thing and birds of the air, for I'm sorry that I've made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. And this is the part I want to talk about. It says, then, this is the genealogy of Noah. Noah was a just man, perfect in his generations. Okay. That's the word I want to talk about, because he was perfect in his generations. We know that he was not a perfect man, okay, but it actually says perfect in his generations. And what that is, if that word is tamim in Hebrew, it just means without blemish and spotless. Okay, so that means that, but he also had 3 sons, who also had had 3 wives.
Right.
Okay. My other theory that I tend to lean towards is that one of them, okay, if not all, but I believe just one, was still carrying a Nephilim mitochondrial DNA.
Okay.
And so then after the flood, in fact, the scripture later goes on. So right after the flood, you have the incident with Ham and his father.
Right. That's another study.
Okay. That's another. And so the whole land of Canaan is cursed. Okay. From the whole lineage, from Ham on. And here's the interesting thing. If you look in scripture, every other giant account in scripture is in the lineage of Ham in the land of Canaan. Okay. And so I think it's one of those two things. But tell me what your opinion is. Do you fall on any of those, or do you have a different opinion?
I can track right there with you when you get to all the ites, the Canaanites, the Amalekites, all of them that, and so we could look at that like the sons of Anak were there and they were giants. And so I totally get there with you. But I want to go back to pre-flood and real quick just say the purpose of, and I do kind of, tend to extrapolate a lot of facts out of the book of Enoch. So it's the Enochian text, not Enoch 2, but the book
Watchers
of Enoch, yes. And so you have 200 watchers and Azaziel and Semaziel and whatever the other names were. I mean, they're listed. They're given pretty good accounts. And so if you take some of that and you don't take it as scripture, but you take it as context that you have to consider, then what you can take from that is you can get to the point of what was the purpose here? The purpose was to corrupt the seed of man.
That was always the purpose.
That's always the purpose. And so really the purpose was not to procreate because it looked fun or because those women were beautiful. And so once you get yourself to the point where you're going to decide, okay, these were actual angels that somehow took a physical form and they decided to take wives, not necessarily, hey, can I marry your daughter? And we're going to go on a honeymoon, but they took them, whatever that means.
That's why I believe the Genesis 4:19 account is important, because I think there's a transaction made.
I think it was too, and I think that if you have these fallen angels, then what do they have? They have knowledge, and they have in the book of Enoch. It's pretty easy to see that these angels taught these different crafts and these different trades, and gave knowledge here, and they taught men how to kill each other and make weapons and everything. And so you don't have to stretch it very far once you're thinking through. Okay, the purpose was to corrupt the seed of man. But then in the book of Enoch, they also took animals unto themselves. And so, they tried to corrupt everything that was God's creation. So at this point, God is deciding, I'm sorry I ever made this, and I'm going to start over. And he decides to flood the earth. But he's very specific in what he says. Every bird of the air, every creeping thing, everything that walks on the land. So my question would be, where my mind goes is a little maybe more elementary, simple. What didn't die through the flood?
Should have been anything is in the sea.
Anything that swims, right? And so, you have a line of thought where it's like, okay, well, if you flood the entire earth, you've turned over the sea to where nothing could live in the water either. I'll give you that. However, we don't know that. And we do have big things that swim around in the sea today. They had to get here somehow. They obviously didn't get on the ark. So let's say the whale lived through the flood. What else lived through the flood? So if you give me that, then I could say, well, yeah, you could have some mitochondrial DNA that was reprocreated afterwards. But then could you also not have an entire race of Nephilim, sons and daughters of fallen angels that were created either through men and women or perhaps an animal species as well that could have lived through the flood and still be on the earth today? Because at some point we're going to get all the way to Matthew 24 where we're going to compare the text and say, how does this apply to my life? And why are we even watching this podcast at this point?
Well, and that's